into our persuasive toolbox, what we want to look at first is this idea of a persuasive continuum and moving somebody from one point to the next along that continuum, and kind of the level of persuasion we need to use to move somebody depends on how far they are in terms of where they're starting and where you want them to end. Say you want to just reinforce somebody's existing belief. You don't really need to push that hard from where they are when you step into the room in front of them. You don't need to maybe present as much information to move them, because you are under the assumption that they maybe already agree with the majority of what you're saying. You're just reinforcing an existing belief and perhaps strengthening their position a bit. So an example of reinforcing, which if you're thinking of the continuum like this, reinforcing would just be moving maybe here. And that would be perhaps reinforcing an audience's commitment to maybe corporate sustainability. And your assumption might be, when you do your audience analysis, that you're walking into a room or you're analyzing your fellow students in order to give a presentation in this class, and you're assuming that the majority of the audience agrees that corporate sustainability is a good thing, is a positive thing, and that most organizations should be socially responsible. So when you make that assumption, you maybe feel you don't have to completely change your audience's attitude on this topic, but you do want to maybe nudge them a bit and reinforce their commitment to the idea, and maybe get them to change a couple little behaviors that they might not have changed, or they may not even know they can change. Next along that continuum is something called refute or refutation. And this would be where your assumption might be that the audience, or a good part of the audience, doesn't agree with you, or maybe isn't aware that there's a different side to an argument. And so an example of this might be that you might refute your audience's assumptions about sexual harassment in the workplace being exclusively a women's issue, or an issue about something that women are exclusively victims of. And so maybe your presentation is going to open up your audience's eyes a bit about the nature of what the research reveals with regard to how many men in the workplace experience sexual harassment, and maybe the troubling statistics about how it's unreported and why it's unreported, and what can be done. And you're hoping to maybe shed some light and awareness on the issue. And so this might be what you would consider refuting an existing assumption about the nature of sexual harassment and discrimination in this area that happens in the workplace. And so that might be about halfway along the continuum, because you're not assuming you're going to be met with complete and total resistance, but you certainly feel like you may be refuting an existing belief about a topic. Further along the continuum, we are talking about full-blown change. And this is moving somebody from maybe one point of view all the way to a change on an opinion. So you can think maybe of a couple different areas where you may try to change an opinion. Maybe we were in the area of politics now, or I have an example of people who used to really dig their feet in whether they were loyal to PC or Mac, and you're making an argument which one is better. And why. So you might make that argument, change an audience's opinion about which is superior, which operating system is superior, Mac or PC. And depending on the audience you're addressing, that may be a really hard sell, because you may be addressing, again, a set of engineers or computer IT people or gamers or programmers. So you have to think about your audience analysis in order to consider if you can be successful in moving them from one point to the other. And then with all of your persuasive presentation, when you do your closing statement, you want to make it clear what you're asking of them, which is called a call to action. And the call is that you make it clear exactly what it is you want from them. And then they'll know if you're asking for a change in behavior, if you're asking them to adjust their existing preconceptions or attitudes, if you want them to completely change their minds or go out and do something, vote on an issue, go out and volunteer in an organization, sign their donor card and make sure that they donate their organs, and don't let another day go by before they do this. Make it clear what you're asking them to do. In the case of investing, call and diversify your investment portfolio before another day goes by. So whatever it is, make sure that you ask your audience what it is you want them to do. And we talked a little bit about pathos, and I said that when you're using an emotional appeal, to use it wisely. We're just going to touch on 3 different areas of rhetorical strategy and how we establish our credibility through the use of this. And the first is logos. And this is the way that we use, reliable sources when we cite them, that we use our flow of ideas in a way that makes sense to our audience members, so that we're laying out a logical flow of ideas and a logical claim, and in our arguments when we are making an argument, so that our audience can clearly follow our train of thought. And so it's a logical appeal. And then we want to appeal to our audience's sense of logic, that something makes sense, that we're persuading with the use of reason. The pathos area is that we're appealing to our audience and to elicit and kind of an emotional response to the information we're giving them, using stories, using narrative, using testimonial and example. I said organ donation. If we're sharing an example of what might happen if we don't consider organ donation, then we can definitely elicit an emotional response by sharing something, somebody's story about the impact that organ donation can have on somebody's life personally. Ethos is establishing our credibility when we appeal to the audience's sense of ethics, and we establish our own personal character, and they perceive us to be someone of character, of intelligence, and of goodwill, that we don't mean them harm, that our intention is purely to give them good information, and in our purpose to persuade them that we are not intending to mislead. And credibility, when we use rhetorical strategies, the audience gets to decide on our credibility. We can't just say, here's my credibility, and give it as a gift. They decide if we have credibility, if we maintain credibility. So we need to establish it early on in the introduction and maintain it throughout our presentation by having good, solid research, good source material, and also establishing that faith and trust with our audience.